Good evening. Thank you for joining us this evening. I think we're all set to get started. I'm a one-man tech support tonight, so thanks for joining us. I'm Amanda Lassard. I'm the planning director for the town of Wyndham. And I'm here on behalf of the Long Range Planning Committee to present the committee's approach to zoning changes for the Wyndham Center growth area and proposed affordable housing standards that would apply to growth areas. But first, let's just talk a little bit about Zoom. We are presenting this in a webinar format, which means that you're only going to see me this evening. And you're not going to see anyone else that is in attendance viewing this. We are also streaming this live on Facebook, and it's going to be recorded and to be rebroadcast on the town's cable TV public access channel. So to participate in the Zoom meeting tonight, we're going to have a couple of polls throughout the webinar that will ask you for some feedback kind of as we walk through the presentation. The polls will just pop up on your screen, and there's a radio button you'll have to select to answer the question. Most of them are yes or no questions. If you would like to elaborate on that response, we ask that you use the Q&A box. So this shown on your screen is kind of at the bottom of your Zoom view right now. You have these, you only have 3 items to select on, the mute, raise the hand, and Q&A. So you can type comments in the Q&A. When it comes time at the end of the presentation for where we'll allow people to speak, you can use the raise hand button, or if you're on the telephone, you can press *9. They'll be asked to unmute yourself. You click the unmute button or press *6 if you're on the phone when you're recognized. There will be other ways to participate also if people are watching this on Facebook, either live or later or on television. You certainly can comment on the Facebook feed. We're going to look at them later and compile them. And you can follow up after this meeting by emailing me, calling me, or visiting Town Hall. We have printed handouts available of all this information. I think I'm having some questions about having an issue with audio. Jen, I added Jen Curtis is the planner here in the town just to kind of help out as another presenter. Jen, are you having any issues with audio at the moment? Or if anyone else does, certainly let me know. So moving on, we will be, this is the agenda for this evening. We're going to do a brief introduction, an overview of kind of what got us to this point. We're going to talk about the comprehensive plan and our existing zoning. Then we'll talk about the committee's approach to rezoning the Wyndham Center growth area and review the 2 new proposed zoning districts, the Wyndham Center District and the Village Residential District. We also are proposing some affordable housing standards that are separate from the Wyndham Center rezoning. They're intended, though, to apply to growth areas, and they would apply to this new Wyndham Center district. We'll cover the next steps, and then we'll have a Q&A portion where we'll review your questions or allow you to ask some questions or provide comments. I do want to recognize, since you only are seeing me right now, that there are some members of the Long Range Planning Committee that are in attendance tonight. I see Beth Shizdig, Mike Duffy, Councilor Dave Netto. The planning board member is Mike DeVoid, and our newest Long Range Planning Committee member, Ed Omont. So thanks for being here tonight. So the reason that the Long Range Planning Committee has been charged with proposing changes to our land use ordinance and our zoning map is all driven by the town's comprehensive plan. Our most recent comp plan was adopted in June 2017. It outlines a vision for Windham in the next 10 years. There are numerous goals and strategies in the plan on how we can achieve that vision. They were distilled down into the four big things. The vision and the recommendations were based on extensive public outreach. There was a townwide survey, several public workshops, and a number of stakeholder group meetings. And the Long Range Planning Committee is charged with implementing the comp plan. So mapping out where growth and change are desired and where they're not desired is a central component of comprehensive planning. This is the future land use map that's included in the comprehensive plan. It shows growth areas and rural areas. The growth areas, there's a North Windham growth area, a Windham Center growth area, a South Windham growth area, a residential growth area, and 2 transitional areas. The purpose of the plan, though, is to show where future growth is to be targeted, encouraged, and incentivized, and then where we want to direct growth away from rural areas. As you are probably aware, we've been discussing growth in Windham over the last several years, especially growth in rural areas. One of the 4 big things I mentioned is to keep rural Windham rural. The Long Range Planning Committee had proposed some zoning changes to the rural parts of Windham that are currently zoned farm and farm residential that would have limited growth in those areas. But ultimately those proposals were unsuccessful. After much discussion with the council then directed the Long Range Planning Committee to work on directing growth to growth areas. So really the purpose of this task is to create a place for growth to happen. Growth is both residential and commercial. So this is again about where growth happens, not how fast it will happen. We've certainly had discussions about the rate of growth that's been happening in Windham. And in response to those concerns about residential growth last year, the town adopted a growth management ordinance that caps residential building permits. And we've also recently adopted impact fees that may be a deterrent to growth, but also then will capture funds from new development to help pay for their impact on municipal services. So that brings us back to kind of where we are tonight and the comp plan's recommendation for big thing number 1, to change the game for Windham's growth areas, North Windham, Windham Center, and South Windham. The overall goal is to expand the range of options and the scale of neighborhood developments in these growth areas. We've done lots of other work since the plan was adopted in 2017 in these growth areas. In North Windham, we proposed changes to zoning. You're not seeing the slides full screen. Hold on just a sec. I'm going to stop sharing just for a second so I can see what's happening here. Oh, you're seeing the thing I was seeing. All right, bear with me, I'll fix it. Thank you for commenting on that. I was hoping Jen might help me out. But yes, please use the Q&A if you see some issues. I'll try this one more time. All right, maybe someone can respond to me if you're seeing the appropriate screen that is full size. Please let me know. Great, thanks. All right, so I was saying we have worked on implementing some of these recommendations in the plan in North Windham growth area. We changed some zoning in the C1 and C2 districts to allow for some additional residential development in that area. We're currently also conducting a transportation study with Maine DOT and a sewer study with the Portland Water District. In South Windham, there's been some recent proposals for residential development, and the town has offered up the old former South Windham Fire Station for redevelopment. And then we'll also be undertaking an update to our South Windham Little Falls master plan with the town of Gorham later this year. So now it's time to think about Windham Center. The comp plan describes the boundary of the Windham Center growth area as generally this area that is from kind of the Rotary down 202, really bordering the Black Brook, down to about Twet Road, over to River Road, and up to about Otter Brook, and kind of back across. The boundary that is shown for this growth area in the 2017 comp plan is identical to the boundary for the growth area identified in our 2003 comp plan. The plan also includes this, based on the public feedback, a vision for the town of Windham in 2030. Specifically in this tour through Windham in 2030, it describes Windham Center as a civic village that focuses on increasing the number of homes on smaller lots, resulting in walkable neighborhoods within proximity to schools, the library, recreational facilities, and open space. So this was the guidance on how we would draft zoning that would fulfill the vision that's laid out in the comp plan. So we have a poll question for you right now that I'm going to launch, that is just asking about what your interest is in Windham Center. So I'm going to leave that up for, a few seconds. There are about 45 people that are watching the presentation, so I'll just give you some time to answer that question. I think what you're seeing on your screen again is just kind of the aerial photo with the Windham Center growth area boundary. All right, so I'm going to end the poll and I will share the results. So we see that 3/4 of the people live in the area, and that's good. We did a mailing to the 750 property owners where the zoning is proposed to be changed to get you in on this conversation at the beginning before any recommendations are made to the town council. Okay. Whoops. All right, so let's talk about zoning. What is zoning? It's the rules of the game that describe what's allowed, meaning we list in our ordinance uses that are allowed in certain districts. Where it happens, those zoning districts are shown on the zoning map, and how much development and how it happens. So there are dimensional requirements like lot size and frontage and setbacks, as well as performance standards that may be specific to a certain type of use, or standards for how the lot gets developed. So really the original purpose for zoning across the country was to separate uses. It wasn't appropriate to have high intensity industrial uses right next to residential dwellings. Zoning today is also used as a tool to direct growth. That hasn't really been effective in Windham. Let me show you why. So this is a table that is from the comp plan that looks at the zoning districts that are rural areas and the zoning districts that are our growth areas. So the land area that is zoned as a growth area is about 16% of the town. In the last 10-year period in the comp plan, 1993 to 2013, only about 20% of the development was happening in growth areas. So then rural areas are about 2/3 of the town's land area, and 3/4 of the development was happening in those rural areas. So when we look at the Wyndham Center growth area, that's kind of the red blob here and the zoning underlying it. Wyndham Center growth area is mostly zoned as a rural area. The current zoning is mostly this darker green is farm residential and the lighter green is farm zone. But really state law directs municipalities to, the law is if you have a zoning ordinance, it must be consistent with your town's comprehensive plan. So that's why we're here tonight. One, to implement the vision in our comprehensive plan, and two, to comply with state law. So I want to talk a little bit about the committee's approach to rezoning. First, we reviewed the existing conditions in the Wyndham Center growth area. This is all of the existing land uses. And I know it's kind of a lot to look at right now. There's a lot of different land uses. This is the classification from the assessing data. What jumps out at us right away, though, is that kind of the Pleasant River diagonally through this growth area kind of divides the main types of land uses. To the west, single family house lots are the #1 land use. And then to the east, there are more commercial uses. These brown areas are town or RSU properties. This light blue area is the Presumpscot Regional Land Trust, Blackbrook Preserve, and then some, these brighter green areas down here are properties that have conservation easements that will be forever farms, so can't be developed for anything other than agriculture. We also reviewed some of the existing lot sizes in the area. So that this darker area, the darkest color are lots that are less than an acre, and the lightest color are lots that are over 10 acres. What we see is that there are many lots that are currently non-conforming, meaning that they're less than 1 acre. Again, the Pleasant River divides the kind of the spatial distribution of the size of the lots. To the west, we see some suburban or some subdivision neighborhoods, and they kind of within each subdivision have consistent lot sizes. And into the east, there are smaller lots along Route 202, and these larger lots are really not developable. They're, again, the RSU campus, a forever farm, and the conserved Blackbrook Preserve. So after reviewing that, we looked at what the zoning standards are in other growth areas. The North Wyndham growth area is commercial 1, commercial 2, and enterprise development zoning. The residential growth area is medium density residential, the RM, and the South Wyndham growth area is village commercial and medium density residential. I think what we saw after looking at all of those compared to what the existing lot sizes are and the existing uses that are in the Wyndham Center growth area is that Wyndham Center is different than these other growth areas. There's no existing zoning district that aligns with both the vision for Wyndham Center and those lot sizes and land use. So we proposed 2 distinct zoning districts. So not only is Wyndham Center different from every other zoning district, it's such a large area that there really are significant differences from one side of the growth area to the other. So we are proposing two distinct zoning districts. So this is the where component of zoning. And looking at the proposed zoning map, this lighter area that's labeled VR is the proposed village residential district. The intent of the district is described as being a mixture, residential area with a walkable mixture of limited small businesses that are intended to meet the local neighborhood needs for limited business services. And then the Wyndham Center district to the east of the Pleasant River to Blackbrook has a more, is described its intent as a primarily residential area with a walkable mixture of various uses that promote and support business and community in the area. This is the civic village that we described in the comp plan, that it provides for complementary commercial uses like arts and cultures and public spaces with an increase in different types of residential neighborhoods. So the second poll we have is related to the map. But before I launch that, I just kind of want to describe that. Again, we talked some about what the current zoning is. This map here is showing that to the west, the village residential district, pieces of it are changing from farm zone though to village residential, or farm residential, the lighter area, to village residential. And then on this east side, the Wyndham Center proposed district, again, mostly is today farm residential, but there's a couple areas that are farm residential, that are farm zone changing to Wyndham Center, or there's a C3 portion up here that we're proposing to include in the Wyndham Center district. The boundary, the zoning district changes do extend slightly beyond the growth area boundary. We're also proposing to change this area around the Otterbrook Estates from the farm zone to farm residential zone. So it's not an island of farm zone. This is meant to be a residential transitional area, and that seems more consistent with the area. So we're asking you a poll question related to what you think about the proposed zoning map. It is a, okay. It's a yes or no question. And if there are changes or other comments you'd like to make on the zoning map, you can certainly type them in the Q&A box, or you can, write it down, think about it, and save it for later when we get to the live Q&A and you'd like to ask that question or make that comment later. And while this is happening, I know this is difficult to see on a Zoom meeting. A lot of this, all of this information is available on the town's website on the Long Range Planning Committee's page to look at more closely. And it's also available in hard copy in the town office for anyone to pick up and look at. So I'll end the poll and share the results, and it looks like we're kind of about 50-50 on the answer to that question. Right. All right, so this other component of zoning is what's allowed. Again, this is a very difficult table to read likely on your screen. It's a list of all the uses and what's allowed and what's not allowed in the proposed districts. And it's shown next to what the uses that are permitted and not permitted in the farm and farm residential districts, just for comparison. But to give you kind of the big picture view, the Wyndham Center district is proposing new uses that are both residential and commercial. The residential uses are 2-family and multifamily buildings. And as described in the intent of the district, the commercial uses are limited in nature and are meant to complement the residential development. They generally are artist studios, banks, daycares, drive-through parks and restaurants, and some commercial and personal business services. There's a little asterisk right here because while they're permitted, they're limited in size. There's a maximum square footage or a limited number of seats in a restaurant, and drive-throughs aren't permitted for restaurants. I'm happy to answer more questions specifically about these later. Another thing to note, though, is that by changing from farm residential to the Wyndham Center District, there are some uses that are currently permitted in farm residential that will no longer be allowed. And those are piggeries and poultry facilities, campgrounds, golf courses, kennels, mineral extraction, sawmills, and shipping containers. None of which I think are there. There's no existing uses like that today anyway. Similarly, for the village residential proposed district, there's new residential uses proposed, 2-family and multifamily. The multifamily is proposed to be limited to 4 units in a multifamily building, and very limited commercial uses, artist studios, childcare facilities with a maximum of 50 children, parks, and personal business services. So those are things like seamstresses and hair salons. Again, also no longer allowed in the village residential that are currently allowed in farm residential. The list is nearly identical to the Wyndham Center District: piggeries, poultry facilities, golf courses, mineral extraction. So that's kind of the brief overview of the uses that are proposed to change. We're asking you a similar question for your feedback on these recommended changes to the uses. I'm gonna launch that poll. Again, it's a yes or no. If there are things that you would propose changing, please type them in the Q&A box, or make a note to share that with us when we get to the end of the presentation and take some public comment. All right, I see about 80% of people have responded. I'm gonna end the poll and I'll share the results. Kind of a 55% would make some changes, 45% are okay with it. Again, when we get to the end, the committee would really appreciate to hear maybe some specifics around what you would suggest making changes to. All right, so finally, kind of this third component of zoning is how development happens and how much is allowed. So the dimensional standards that are proposed, and kind of right in the middle of this table, are the 2 new districts. And they're presented alongside, for comparison, what the similar standards are in the farm and farm residential districts, as well as down at the bottom, the medium density residential and village commercial, kind of these growth area standards. So in general, the 2 new districts are proposing to reduce the minimum lot size, to increase the density, that is the number of dwelling units that are allowed on a lot, to reduce the minimum road frontage that is required. The Wyndham Center District is proposing to increase the maximum height from 35 to 45 feet, and would also reduce the front setback. Additionally, there are performance standards that regulate how development happens. Some standards that are specific to these 2 districts are that we are requiring that there be pitched roof lines with a minimum of a 412 pitch. There's a little graphic here just to show you compared to other roof styles, kind of how steep a pitch that is. Again, as I talked about when we presented the uses that may be allowed in the district, that there are limitations, and those are specified in the performance standards, that they limit the size of these commercial uses. There are also buffer requirements for abutting residential uses if one of these limited commercial uses is proposed. There's a requirement that all new streets must be public streets, and that sidewalks be provided along the frontage of existing public streets. Both of these requirements are described in the comp plan as, public infrastructure that's important in growth areas. There's going to be limitations on the number of curb cuts. Drive-through facilities will have to avoid queuing on public streets. And in this proposed new Wyndham Center district, where there are commercial uses allowed, and if they qualify for site plan review, those buildings would need to meet the commercial design standards. So again, a similar poll for how development happens. Do you agree with these proposed dimensional and performance standards for the proposed districts? If you are saying no, there are changes you'd like to see made, please type them in the Q&A or tell us about them when we get to the end of this presentation. All right. Again, we're about at 80% of people that have voted. So I'm going to end the poll and share the results. So we've got about 2/3 of the people that would suggest making changes to these standards. Again, would like to hear more about if those are these lot and density standards or the specific performance standards. So those were all the items specifically related to the 2 new zoning districts. We have also drafted some affordable housing standards. This is intended to be separate from that packet of proposals that the Long Range Planning Committee would send to the council. But in our discussion about talking about housing types and density, the comp plan does specifically recommend that the town amend our land use regulations in growth areas to increase the density, decrease lot sizes, setbacks, and road widths to incentivize and encourage development of workforce and affordable housing within growth areas. So because this may be something that these standards could be applicable in the new proposed Wyndham Center zoning district, we decided to present it at the same time just to get some feedback on this. The standards would also apply to the other growth area districts, commercial 1 and 2 in North Wyndham, the medium density residential kind of around the Barney Mill area, and the village commercial district in South Wyndham. These incentives would only apply to developments if they're on public water, and all the units in the development meet the federal government's for median family income standard that's set by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Those standards are related to having there's an annual income limit, and then there's a maximum monthly housing cost that someone would pay for their rent or mortgage and other costs related to their housing. These are all standards that Maine Housing enforces when they provide funding for these types of projects. The ordinance specifies that this affordability is maintained for 10 years if they're owner occupied units or 30 years if they're rental units. And then the specifics of the kind of bonuses, if you will, the increase in density, and we separate them by if the project is located on septic, that their density could be 5,000 square feet per unit, and they could have their height and dimensional standards adjusted by 20%. If the project's on sewer, could have a density of 2,000 square feet per unit, and those other dimensional standards are adjusted by a third. So just to kind of talk a little bit more about what that density means. In the commercial 2 district and our retirement overlay, we allow retirement communities to have a density of 5,000 square feet per unit. In the village commercial district, where there is public sewer, the density there is 2,500 square feet per unit. And what that means, to kind of flip that around, is what we're proposing, this 2,000 square feet per unit where there's public sewer is about 21 units per acre. And this 5,000 square feet is about 8 units per acre. As an example of kind of a recently proposed multifamily building in North Windham, the C1 district doesn't have a net density requirement. So there's a project that's proposing a 24 unit apartment on about 2 acres. So that's about 11 and a half units per acre. An example of kind of what that building looks like, this is kind of the front of a 12 unit building. Maybe something we could see as a 12 unit building. So we're asking for your feedback on the town providing some incentives for affordable housing in our growth areas. Let's see, I'll launch that poll. There are a number of communities surrounding us that do have different incentives for affordable housing. This was a very conservative measure to kind of try to help get some projects like this in Windham. The comp plan does look at the kind of range of housing types, and Windham is mostly single family homes, and while they're affordable for the greater Portland area, there is a need for some affordable housing in Windham. Right, so give you a couple more seconds because we got about 75% of people voting. And if you have some specific comments about these affordable housing standards, please write them in the Q&A. Okay, end the poll and share the results. And we see about, again, similar to the last poll, 55% say there should be some changes and 45% support the proposal. So thank you for kind of providing some instantaneous feedback as we kind of went through the proposal to give you an overview. So I just want to talk about next steps. This really is kind of the beginning of the public process. I know I heard some comments that people were concerned about getting notice of this meant, it was a done deal. This is not. This is something that the committee is still working on. We are seeking public input, and we'll review these comments over the next month before any recommendations are made to the town council. We are welcoming public feedback following this meeting. I've noted here where this information is available online, and you can email me additional comments or call me, and we will be compiling all the public comments that we receive over the next month, and we'll kind of produce a summary report. Then the committee will be making a recommendation to the town council and having a discussion. They will be 2 separate recommendations, one on this zoning for the Windham Center growth area and one on the affordable housing standards. So while they are linked to each other, they are going to be handled separately. And then if the council is in favor of kind of pursuing the recommendations of the committee, the official process for changing the land use ordinance would require the planning board to have a discussion and a public hearing before they make a recommendation to the town council. And the town council would have a discussion and another public hearing. So a few other opportunities for public comment on this process. This is my last slide. We're going to I haven't looked yet at the comments that people have made as we had the polls up, but we're happy to hear some specific comment if you would like to be recognized to ask a question or provide some comments. If you're using Zoom, again, there's the raise your hand function at the bottom of your screen. You could type some comments in the Q&A box. And when I call on you to speak, if you're interested, you'll have to unmute yourself to speak. We'll be looking at any comments that are on the Facebook meeting tomorrow and going on from there. We're not going to respond to those live right now. And again, you can send me comments. You can stop by the town hall and pick up these handouts. And if it's more helpful for you to pick up the handouts, mark them up and send them back, that would be much appreciated as well. So I'm not seeing anyone that wants to talk to us live right now, but let me see if I can just read some comments. I will be happy to share them with you. We did enable some voting on the comments. So if people have put some thumbs up, meaning that they agreed with the comment, it did promote it to the top. And just for those that are interested, I will kind of just read through these that comment about living off of Park Road in the middle of the proposed village residential district. The notion of making it walkable village-like area is totally unrealistic. So there's some questions about protecting the farm zone from having smaller lot sizes. Someone's not interested in any businesses in this area as the school is here. Concern about marijuana businesses. Concerned about the density and losing the rural feel. I think there's concerns about the schools. I think, as I mentioned at the beginning, you know, this committee and the comp plan itself works under the assumption that growth does happen, and the job of the zoning ordinance is to direct where it can happen and how it can happen. The rate at which is being discussed all the time and what the costs are for municipal services. Question about traffic. Concerned about businesses near schools. Again, how will the growth impact the schools? And everything is shuffling around. So I see someone, Dee Reese, that has raised their hand. I will allow you to speak. If you.
Oh yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I see all this on the maps and everything. Do they have any estimate of the size of the population that all this change will hold with all these smaller lot sizes and stuff? How many people are we talking about that you're expecting to live in this area?
We didn't do that sort of analysis. A lot of how land gets built out is, you know, driven by if people sell their lot or divide it. We did do a maximum build out, but I'm happy
that would be nice if we could have some kind of idea. I mean, what we're talking about here.
Mm-hmm. Noted. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks.
All right. So because the comments are moving around, I see someone had a question about backyard chickens, sheep, and pigs. It's not a commercial agricultural use, but more of a hobby. Agriculture is still a use. Animals that are accessory to residential uses are still permitted. The uses for piggery and poultry facilities are large numbers of those animals. We do have a domesticated chicken ordinance that does limit the number of chickens someone can have, but otherwise, all of the kind of agriculture and rural land uses that people are doing in other growth areas and in residential neighborhoods are still would still be allowed here. So one of the questions was if one of the height proposals is 45 feet, is that a 4-story? Was that pretty tall compared to existing buildings? It potentially could be a 4-story building, even with the pitched roof requirement. It may be a little taller than some existing buildings. Our conversations in the committee were that there's no height limit in North Windham. Really, the height limit in Village Commercial should likely be a little bit higher, should be this 45 feet. That is similar to other, downtown Village areas that have 3- and 4-story buildings. Question about what's going to protect us from more businesses like marijuana businesses popping up in the Wyndham Center area. Isn't there a setback requirement from school properties? Yes, there are from setbacks from school properties for marijuana businesses. The types of retail marijuana businesses that are permitted in North Windham aren't proposed to be permitted here. Medical marijuana caregivers are permitted in every district, but they still have to meet those setbacks from school properties. Concern about how much commercial growth is considered for Route 202 because of from Wyndham Center Road to River Road and how densely we're going to allow smaller lots. This district doesn't go all the way to River Road. This is just to Sweat Road. There was a question about with all these homes, will there mean increased taxes? Again, the assessment on changes to these lot sizes and conversations that I've had with the assessor are to be determined. The market would determine what the value of new house lots are, and what the taxes are based on those assessments are determined by what the budgets are that are set by the school department and the town. Someone's concerned about Wyndham turning into Westbrook. There's a question about if you own property that's in 3 different zones. There are standards that the zoning standards where the property is apply, or where the zoning district is apply to that portion of a property. There are some standards that allow for the zoning district boundary to be moved like 50 feet or so to apply standards from one district to another. There are a couple of properties that were shown on the map here that do bisect some parcels, and we remained consistent with that for a couple of the locations. It's because they're following like a utility corridor, and that seems like, even though it's not a property line, a natural break. The other ones are, I think the current zoning district boundary does kind of cross-cut a property, but if there's some specific properties that you are interested in recommending that we follow the full property line, I think that's something we'd like to hear specifically, and we would consider. I have 2 hands raised. Robert Hunt.
Yes. Hello.
Hi.
Hi. Can you hear me? All right.
Yes.
So I think my major question living in Wyndham Center, looking at, the potential for growth, obviously growth is going to happen. And I do recognize the need for, some sort of expansion of the residential communities here within Wyndham. But what are we doing to preserve the size of the neighborhoods? I look up in the North Wyndham and I see some places like Forsyth Drive, which has the, obviously, very compact, kind of postage stamp lots with, these very compacted, tightly spaced housing elements. Is that what we're looking to move into the Wyndham Center area, or are we doing anything to protect or at least structure the type of neighborhood that we're bringing into the neighborhood, so that we're not, kind of having almost a suburban sprawl type element that comes in?
That was part of the approach in proposing two separate zoning districts, was that we looked at the existing character of neighborhoods in this growth area, that there are distinctly different, the neighborhoods that are on the west side of this growth area between River Road and the Pleasant River are typically about an acre, and they're mostly single family homes. So the intention was to not be drastically different. The lot size reduction is smaller, and the multifamily housing that we're proposing here is going to be limited to 4 units. I think with the requirement for pitch roofs, our discussion has been, if there were townhouse style condos, that would be in character with the neighborhood. So that was what was envisioned in some of these standards, but and was intentional in our approach to the proposal. This is not intended to be, if you're looking at a North Wyndham area, this is why the zoning is, this is a proposal that has zoning standards that are very different than North Wyndham. The vision for North Wyndham is very different than here.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Rebecca? Whoops. All right.
Hi, Amanda. Thank you. I was wondering, we're on the east side and the map was confusing. You showed one that had some like blacked out areas and the green. I thought some of that was Forever Farm. So we're kind of curious on how much growth will be like right near these areas that are supposed to be kind of the Forever Farmland.
Gonna go back to
Yeah, what
over
is
here.
Yeah.
So this is the Forever Farm around here.
I don't see your cursor.
Oh, you don't? Okay. The lower end. That's too bad you can't see my cursor. Oh, over here?
Oh, there we
Now
go.
can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay. So these blacked out areas are the Forever Farm. So there are, this isn't really accurate. Like there's a development that's happening right here that won't, will kind of max out its capacity as a retirement home. But there are a few other parcels that, could be developed. Is there something more specific?
No, I think that was my biggest question. So the land on the right side of, is that Pope Road that comes in? So that could all be developmental land, like developed land.
Right. This is Pope Road, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. I was trying to get back to some of the comments that were in the Q&A, but they're shifting around as people are giving them a thumbs up. So it's hard for me to follow. If there is something specific, I see a question about where's the community center supposed to go. We don't know yet. Someone asked if we could elaborate a bit on how the zone came about through the comp plan process, especially from public input. I think I tried to cover that quite a bit at the beginning, in that the 2-page narrative on the vision for Wyndham and a tour through Wyndham in 2030, that was specifically derived from following the townwide survey, where we asked about different values for communities and things that were important to the community members. We had a couple of large public meetings where we specifically called out what the kind of higher priority values were, and worked with the people that attended those meetings and stakeholder groups to come up with that vision statement and think about what the growth area boundaries were. We looked at the 2003 comp plan and asked about, is your vision for these areas the similar, the same, is it different? You know, that was really the process on how the comp plan looked at a vision for the town as a whole, but also this Wyndham Center growth area. So I'm going to ask for a rough estimate of when and if this will go through. So the Long Range Planning Committee is gonna look at this probably for another month and make a recommendation to the council. If they want to move it through the planning board process and back to the council, it could be another 3 or 4 months. There's a question about what happened to the preservation of open space that there was a meeting a few years ago about, in light of the growth we're now proposing. Preservation of open space, as I mentioned at the beginning, is still another important goal in the comp plan. As we talked about, one of the other 4 big things is to keep rural Wyndham rural. We just completed an open space plan for the town that the council adopted. It's on our website and available, but it has recommendations for preserving some specific areas that are important to Wyndham's rural character, but also making recommendations on preserving open space within neighborhoods. So that's still an important component. The focus of it, again, was preserving large areas of habitat and rural working lands in rural Wyndham. This in a growth area is the place where growth should happen, and we should have open space throughout neighborhoods, but they're not opposites of each other. We think we still need open space in Wyndham, but we also need a place for residential and commercial growth. So question about a plan for expanding natural gas service in the Wyndham Center zone. I know there was just an extension down from Wyndham Center Road to like the Sweat Road, perhaps. I think natural gas ends up being at the interest of the provider, the gas company, and if they have users that would use it. So I think we had that conversation with them to serve the public safety building, and there were enough users to warrant the extension. So the town isn't directly involved in driving where those utilities are installed, but contacting the gas company to let them know you're interested in being a user, that would, I think, be helpful to them. There was a question about, will this impact or change already existing subdivision requirements? It will, to the extent that we just changed the subdivision requirements for the farm and farm residential district. We require a conservation subdivision or a country subdivision in those 2 districts. Those apply right now in the majority of the Wyndham Center growth area because it's zoned as a rural area. So if the zoning was changed, subdivisions that are developed in this area wouldn't be required to be a conservation subdivision. They could be a traditional subdivision with the lot sizes and frontage requirements that we spell out here. They could optionally create open space. There's a question about the transitional area and what the development goals are there. The comprehensive plan just identifies transitional areas where growth will continue to happen in the way that it has without trying to incentivize it or direct away from it. So there's that residential transition area between North Wyndham and this Wyndham Center area along River Road. And then there's also a commercial transitional area on Route 302. I'd have to look at the comp plan to tell you exactly, but it's neither growing nor directing growth away from it. There's some concerns about traffic congestion and safety and the bridge across the Pleasant River and the historic character of the area. Concern about Wyndham Center doing what Westbrook's done on Spring Street. So I think I tried to look at all of these. What we're going to do is compile them. If there's something that I didn't see that you'd like me to specifically comment on here tonight, please raise your hand. Otherwise, I would say that we appreciate the feedback that you've given on the polls and providing this written comment. And let me move back to the last sheet on ways that for the next few weeks, you can continue to provide feedback on this proposal to the committee or contact the planning department with any additional comments you might have. So this would be the kind of last call if there's no other specific questions. This is just a question about where you can find the entire proposal. Question, let me go back a slide. Right here, the proposed maps and ordinances are available on the town website under the Long Range Planning Committee's page. So if that's it, I think I'm all done. So thank you very much for joining us. And this will be available to watch later, or call me if you have additional questions, and kind of tune in to the town council in the next couple months to see how this moves forward. Thank you.